What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV. Make sure you go to coinmastery.com/invest. Sign up for the newsletter. It'll help you with all the information you need to get started with crypto. We're here to help you make better decisions, capitalize on this huge opportunity, and talk about what to do each day to totally dominate. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you all survived the Bitcoin gold fork. Today, what we're going to talk about is really what happened because of the fork, what happened to the market, what this means in the short term, what this means potentially for the Segwit2x fork, and then also what this may mean down the road strategically, and a few other news articles. But we're mostly just going to focus on the relevant news of the day, because that's where all the price action is, and that's also where probably everybody's mind is right now. So let's kick it off. Let's open up Bitcoin right now. I'm looking at the 30-minute chart right now, and there was a pretty good downtrend, and then we saw a huge sell-off last night, right as the Bitcoin gold block was mined. And if you didn't notice yesterday when we were looking at the countdown, that was actually accelerated because the blocks are getting mined faster than people expected them to. And so it happened a lot more quickly. Within that time frame, when the actual snapshot was taken, meaning when the blockchain when it said, all right, everybody who owns Bitcoin at this moment will be credited for Bitcoin gold, there was a big sell-off, as you can see right here, with this big series of red candles. So everybody had been buying up Bitcoin, get the snapshot, and then they immediately dumped it in hopes of the Bitcoin gold getting credited and also selling their Bitcoin to go and buy up altcoins. So almost like clockwork, as soon as this sell-off happened, we saw a huge surge in altcoins, and we're continuing to see upward mobility, upward movement in the altcoin market, which we'll talk about. Once this dumped and people moved their money over to altcoins, there's a bit of stabilization, and this price has been bouncing between 58 and 5,600 for the last few hours. And I think it'll continue to do this for a little while. And that's just the market getting its feet back and people scalping trades here and there. And, a lot of people just making sure, waiting and see type of situation. It's always interesting. One thing I've learned, and I've learned this from talking to and being in contact with traders, people who are hardcore traders, and also just seeing the way that they go about a day. What I've learned in situations where there's a million things going on, there's just an endless feed of Twitter, of Telegram, of Facebook. It's just never ending of what do I do? What's going to happen? What's next? What traders have taught me is that the price on the chart and the volume bars, and if this is new to you, it really just means that what's the price at the given time and how much volume is exchanging hands on any given exchange. That tells the story. It's impossible to try to process all the information from all these different networks and for news outlets and whatever, and one person says one thing, another person says the other thing. Really, this is where charts, in my opinion, are the most helpful, because it clears out everything else. And if you don't know how to read these charts, it really just comes down to, is there a lot of volume and is there a lot of price movement happening? Meaning, looking at this big drop, you can see that there is a lot of buying and selling happening. The volume is increasing, which led to a huge price drop. That volume was mostly sell volume. That's what it was. And, or at least the exchanges were driving the price down, I should say. And that's the name of the story. And as you see these ups and downs in the volume, and as you see them in the price, you can get a better idea of what the overall market sentiment is without having to process all the different millions of info that you're getting. And I think that this is something that honestly just comes from checking this stuff out often, like seeing when the volume happens, comparing it to the overall sentiment you're hearing, looking at the price and how it's impacting price. it's just a really good way to clear out everything else and help you focus and add to your data points of making decisions. And this is coming from somebody, myself, who I have no technical background. I've learned a lot of this stuff from just being around really smart people, and this is what they do. And they often rely on me or ask me, hey, what are you seeing? What's your fundamental macro stance on this? What's the bigger picture? And they'll relay what they're seeing with the charts. And that's how we help each other. And it's been a good learning experience to be able to understand what's going on here. It's kind of like early on when I was building a lot of apps, I can't program anything related to apps, but I could understand what they were asking and I could understand what was going on in the code. I just couldn't do it myself. And that's typically a very good position to be in, is when you at least know what you're talking about when you're looking at the different chart indicators and everything else. And luckily you can learn pretty quickly on how to trade this stuff, but understanding the basics is a great way. If you ever want to help out someone with great technical skills, you can provide value to them because they might not see things that you might see easily. And that's often how you can get really great info from people that have different skills than you. So that's what I was doing a lot of yesterday. I wasn't spending a lot of time on Twitter or social networks because there's just too much and it's easy to get distracted. So the big news was it dumped. Now it's stabilizing. Conversely, altcoins, for the most part, really just took off. I mean, if you look at any of these, look at Ethereum was just at the top of the list to jump to the number one volume. You can see right when that dump happened on Bitcoin, there was a huge spike up in volume. All the cash that was dumped right here, I shouldn't say all, a majority of the cash that was dumped from Bitcoin was traded into altcoins. And this chart, this big spike, is pretty much across the board. You can just go down the list here in Bittrex and you'll see it over and over. And obviously some are better than others. And if you didn't buy in at the exact bottom, you may not be as stoked because you're like, okay, well now I'm back to where I started from. I need this to happen 3 more times before I actually see a profit. And I think that that's part of the game. That's one thing I've learned, is that one of the hardest things when you see altcoins bouncing is when you didn't buy it at the bottom. And this, let's say, Verge, 32%. I don't know if that's, it's always, you always got to do the math manually to make sure that you get the right percentage. But let's say that people are talking about, oh man, I just made 25, 30% because I bought it at the exact bottom and this is awesome. But let's say you bought it at, like, in this case, 150 Satoshis for Verge. And that's not a 32% gain. That's just recouping 32% of your losses. Often that can be the hardest part, because then you're really like, oh man, okay, well, I just need this to keep going. Just keep getting up so that I get back up to the level that I bought in at. And the reason why that's dangerous is because you don't learn a lot when you have that mentality. When you're looking at this and you're like, well, here's my position, and all I can do is try to hope that the price keeps coming up, and I get back to real profits and life is good again, and I can start thinking about the moon. There's 2 things that you should always be doing in situations like this, which, just for the record, I can tell you, one of the hardest things about being on Twitter is it seems like all these people pick the bottoms perfectly and they put all their money in right at the exact time, and now they're just making it rain. But it's kind of like Instagram. People post pictures of the greatest moments of like the perfect moment. It's all edited, everything. And the same is true on Twitter when it comes to pics. It's easy to throw up a lot of different things, and then a few of them hit, and you're like, oh man, I nailed that. But you don't know how much money they put in. You don't know what percentage of their portfolio they put in. And you can easily assume that it was a huge amount, but often it's not that much money, relatively speaking. And I'm not saying that to push anyone down or to say that anything isn't legit. There's plenty of people that crushed it. But it's important to realize that nobody is nailing this every single time with a huge amount of money. People may nail it with small bets, but it's really hard to nail it with big bets. And that's the difference between like a real trader, hedge fund trader, or somebody who's moving like a couple $1 million a day, and somebody who's getting started. So that's just a side note. So the two things you can do about this. The first is passive, which is more of okay, here's what I have. I'm not going to touch it. And I'm going to look at this and replay the last 24 hours as if I was doing it again. What would I do differently? And you go through and you write it down, put it on your computer, whatever, and you walk through the hour by hour and you write down what you would have done differently and why. That's really important, because if you don't write down why you would have done it differently, you don't actually learn it. So maybe you'd look at this and say, okay, well, as I saw the price going up, I would have done X. And as I saw the price start to drop, I would have done X, and here's why. And you fill it in based on what you learned, right? What your emotional state was, what you saw happening, what sort of conclusions you saw being drawn, what sort of conclusions you drew that were right, that were wrong. So that's the first thing you can do on days like today if you didn't necessarily, if this wasn't like a huge windfall, it was more of a recouping of losses. The second thing you can do is you can often level down on your, downgrade your dollar cost average, what do you call it? Like your position. So if you own, let's say $1,000 worth of Verge, you could potentially sell off 20% of that just to make your overall position a little lighter. And while you didn't necessarily take a profit on the whole position or even a small position, any of it, you're cutting the future leverage of that portfolio position. In other words, if you owned enough altcoin that it stung, that you're just trying to recoup this so that you can get back to normal, you are by definition not balanced enough in your portfolio. There should never be a day short of a crash, right, that you are on edge, that you don't think that it seems like things are falling apart for you. And I know that selling at a loss is really painful and it's not always the best strategy, but it's more that if your portfolio isn't balanced to begin with, you need to rebalance that at some point. And when you get a 30% swing, this may be a good time. It's up to you. Right? I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not going to tell you exactly what works for you, how much risk you want to take, but that is a possibility. And it really just comes down to, can you sleep at night? If you can't, that's going to be a huge issue. You are not going to make really good decisions if you're stressed out all the time. And this will happen again if you're stressed out all the time. If you're not stressed out all the time and you learn from what you're doing, the chances of the next time that's happening, you do make profit are much higher. That's part of the learning process. And that's something that a lot of people look down on. And that's what kind of bothers me about Twitter with crypto is a lot of people talk about, oh, noobs and all these people, like, you don't know what you're doing and you better not be selling. You're an idiot. And I get what they're trying to say, like strong hands and play the long game and hold and all that. But sometimes you do need to learn. And if you're just getting started in this, I'm not saying that you should necessarily dump everything you're doing, but you have to get rebalanced at some point. You have to do it. And this is a better time than when it was really painful 3 days ago. So it's all a game of trade-offs. It's all a game of decisions. So that's what I think most people can take away from this. And then also just do the price increases back up your thesis and your plan that you had? During this drop, what were you thinking about? What were you writing down? What were you expecting to happen with this Bitcoin gold fork? On which coins? Was that Was that true, and why was that true? That's going to be really helpful as you want to get better, as you want to make better decisions. Let's talk about a little bit more about what happened with Bitcoin Gold. So I'm looking at Yobit, which is I don't necessarily endorse. I've never used this platform. I wouldn't recommend anyone use it, but they were doing Bitcoin Gold futures, and you can see right around the time of the snapshot, it was trading right around 0.073 Bitcoin, and then just completely dropped off. And now it's trading at 0.0539. Early in the day, it was upwards up at 0.09. Right when it first started, it slowly petered down, and then it dumped out. A little bit of stabilization here. So the price of Bitcoin Gold, as you can see over here on CoinMarketCap, has dropped a bunch. It's bouncing back. It's looking like it might stabilize somewhere around 225, 230, something like that. But the real story is that it probably wasn't worth trying to play this Bitcoin accumulation game to get something that wasn't worth anything at all. And that's a really important point, because the next big thing is Segwit2x, which is coming up, and I'm pulling up Coinbase's FAQ. That it seems like they're updating this every 24 hours because they need to come up with a new plan or new whatever. And in the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin Gold was relatively small. It was kind of like cool. Segwit2x is a big deal. It's almost Bitcoin Cash level fork, because there's a lot of important people that were behind it. It was a huge New York agreement that had a while back. And there's just a lot more at stake, a lot more viability with 2x. And now it seems like it's losing a little bit of steam. But the reason why I bring this up is because history is a really amazing teacher. Bitcoin Cash had the big run up, the big drop. Bitcoin Gold had a relatively big run up. It's hard to know if this was exactly for Bitcoin Gold or if this was for institutional money or whatever else. But there was a bit of a run up, and then there was a little bit of a sell off. But realistically, I mean, that wasn't much. It was a couple percentage points, or maybe even 1% point. And then it stabilized. You don't see the huge drop like we did with Bitcoin Cash, because it wasn't considered a big of a deal, and we'd already had Bitcoin Cash before, and we saw what happened. And so now what happened? Look, we look back at Bitcoin Cash. There was money to be made in the first 24 hours of Bitcoin Cash, give or take. And then it was a second pump, and then it's dropped off considerably since that. With Bitcoin Gold, it looks like this is probably not a profitable thing to do, to try to aggregate Bitcoin and then sell it off. As we go into Segwit2x, that means we have two strikes against this fork thing in terms of trying to arbitrage the money. This is going to be really interesting to see if people still follow that same psychology. And this isn't until middle of November. It's going to be mined at block number 494,784. Projected is November 16th. So it's, we don't know what the actual price is going to do. Chances are it's going to go up pretty big, because if Coinbase, this is the first time Coinbase is doing it, which it adds a whole new element because they have so many people. But think about the people that are buying Bitcoin for these fork splits. Bitcoin Cash kind of worked for some people, but not for most. Bitcoin Gold probably isn't going to work out for most people in terms of the trade-offs that they decided to make in terms of how much money they could have made. And then now we have Segwit2x. Are they going to go 3 for 3 on that? And I think that that's going to be very interesting to watch. That's definitely what I'm going to be watching. Like I said, it's 3 weeks away, so you can't make a whole lot of decisions. But I do think that I think altcoins are going to keep doing well for at least the next week or so. I think, will they keep going up? I don't know, but I don't think they're going to drop anytime soon. And I think Bitcoin is going to have a bit of a consolidation period. I think that, I said this last week, this resistance level, high 4900s, to me is a no-brainer. I don't know if it's going to happen before 2x or after 2x, but that to me just seems like it's so clear that that's the next buy zone. And we'll see what happens, but that's my alerts are still set there. That's still what my plan is. And 2x is going to be there's some new factors, but there's also some history now. So I think that that's going to be really interesting. What's also interesting with 2x, excuse me, is that Jeff Garzik, who was the lead developer driving Segwit2x, has recently, I think yesterday or in the very recent history, announced that he's going into building a new coin called Metronome, which is really a connector type of situation. Arc does this, Chainlink does this, where it can connect different blockchains together. Now, I don't know. I haven't done any research on Metronome or enough to be able to give you guys a good read on what the product is. But the important point is this guy is the lead developer for Segwit2x. And all of a sudden, right after Bitcoin Gold, he's saying, I'm actually going to go do an ICO and start my own coin. I'm not going to be a lead developer on Segwit2x anymore. That does not bode well for Segwit2x. The other thing is that with Coinbase, this is, for a lot of the Bitcoin community, this is a big deal, where they're going to keep the Bitcoin we're using now as BTC, and they're going to name 2x B2X. And from a nomenclature standpoint, from a branding standpoint, that's a big deal for confusion's sake and for just reaffirming that the regular Bitcoin is still the go-to winner in this whole thing. So there's a lot of stuff pointing to the 2x as losing steam. The fact that Bitcoin Gold is probably not a good investment relative to altcoins is not helping at all. And then obviously we're going to watch what happens with Bitcoin price over the next 3 weeks as it relates to 2x. Again, the Coinbase factor is the gorilla in the room, or elephant in the room, I should say, in my opinion, in terms of whether or not this goes up or down. And as it gets closer, we will have a much better deal. But these forks are just losing the intended vision of the forks, which is to create new and theoretically better, I'm putting better in air quotes here, versions of the blockchain that matches Satoshi's original vision of Bitcoin. And that's obviously up for debate depending on who you ask, but momentum is a powerful thing, and Bitcoin BTC has a lot of momentum, and it's very difficult. I was looking through Twitter. I saw a lot of these finance guys who don't care about Bitcoin code. They don't care. They just want to make money. They're all asking, why are there all these forks? What the hell is the problem here? And whether you agree with them or not agree with them, I think that's important to know that that's the kind of question that they are asking. And I think that many of you are probably asking the same thing at this point too, where you're just like, what is going on here? And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I understand the technical implications of it all and the scalability and the block size. I get it. But most people don't care. They care about making money more than anything else. That is why a vast majority of people are in crypto, is to make money. And if these forks mess up the ability to make money, that's a huge problem. Whether you like it or not, that is a huge problem. And Bitcoin Gold didn't work out. Bitcoin Cash has not worked out yet. It's going down a lot. Segwit2x getting a lot of pushback as well. So it's one of those macro forces that it's easy to sit in a room and theorize on why a fork is going to change the world and how it's so much better. But you get into the macro world and you look at what the forces moving it are. Reality is not always what people think. So this will be an ongoing conversation. We'll obviously continue this and keep you guys in the loop. The biggest piece being, what's the price of Bitcoin doing and how does that affect altcoins? I think in the short term, let it ride. Again, I'm personally waiting for this high 49s to hit for any sort of buying activity, but it may not happen for a couple of weeks, couple months, couple days, I don't know, but that's the level I'm looking at. The thing is just too juicy, and this chart thing is, those two just looks too good to pass up. So I'm going to wait on buying any Bitcoin and scalp some altcoins in the meantime, the ones that worked, and taking time today to record this. I mean, if I asked anyone, do you remember exactly what you were thinking about up to and during the Bitcoin Cash split, if you were in the business then? I think a lot of people would have a hard time remembering the exact, here's what I thought, here's what I decided to do, here's what ended up happening. That's why it's really important to catalog this stuff. Write down what your thought process was while it's fresh in your mind. It'll be so important as you get into the next time this happens, which is going to happen in 3 weeks. You will forget why you decided to buy ADX or why you didn't decide to buy ADX, and you want to write that down so that you can refer back to it. Last thing, this is a crazy blog post. I'll link to this, where these coders they got Roger Ver's private key off of a YouTube video, and it's pretty complicated. I shouldn't say complicated. They laid out very clearly how they did it with brute force techniques and really investigating this video and looking through the Gaussian blur that was put over the video stuff. It's very good investigative reporting. It's kind of like white hat hacking or whatever you call it. And I think that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you'll love this post. So I'll link it up for you guys. I think the big thing for you listening is to realize the extent that people will go to get your money. Now, Roger is obviously a very unique situation because he's a polarizing person. People know he has a lot of money, and the more they can post bad news about him or, hey, I gotcha type stuff, the more he loses credibility, and that feeds into the politics of Bitcoin. So I understand that. But I think that what's really important is that this is all possible. And maybe you don't do videos, or maybe you don't post your stuff and whatever, but there are people that will go to any length to take your money from you in a unethical way. People that will just, they'll go to any length, hackers or scammers or whoever else. And I don't mean that to scare anybody. What I mean is that if you're waiting to put off any sort of security measure that you got to do, just start doing it. Yesterday I talked about the book, The Slight Edge, and how every day you should do something that gets you 1% better. This is a very good example. If you have a password that's only 7 or 10 letters, change it to being 22 letters, numbers, and punctuation points. And don't keep the password on your computer or on the internet. Like, write it down somewhere with a paper or put it on a locked hard drive or something that nobody can access. But security is a huge, huge, huge deal, guys. And if people, look, it's just crazy what people can do these days. And I can't tell you how many people are keeping an enormous amount of money on exchanges, or their passwords are super just convenient for them because they want to be able to log in quickly. And this is real stuff. And there are people that can and will take your money if they see an opportunity to. And so from a coding interest standpoint, I think you should read this because it's fascinating, to watch the thought process of this. But from a lesson standpoint, like secure yourself, protect yourself. People are trying to take your money every single day. Mark Cuban always talks about how, as an entrepreneur, the only way to really build something is to constantly think that somebody is coming after your business. They're coming after your money. And I tend to agree with that when you want to build something big and when you want to be you want to be number one and be the best. I think that mindset is pretty much what you need. But I think that in crypto, that's also the mindset you need to have purely from a security standpoint, is that on any given day, somebody is out there or a group of people are out there and they are looking for people whose money they can take. And unfortunately, there's no insurance policy you can buy. I mean, this is your bank. You own your bank. So I keep harping on this because recently, over the weekend, talking to a bunch of traders and stuff, and some people posted screenshots. Hey, here are all my biggest holdings. And obviously, this is a private group or whatever, but it's all on Bittrex. I mean, this is like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I didn't say anything because, I'm not anyone's dad here, but I was like, what are you doing? You're insane. And the only reason I didn't is just because it's kind of a pain to do. And I tell you, I mean, I get emails every day from people like, hey, I got phished yesterday. Can you relay this info on social media? Hey, I got hacked. Hey, what do? I just lost all my money. Every day, emails. And you can't bring it up because it's like, then I'm spreading all this fear, but this is real, guys. You got to protect yourself. Bitcoin Gold website, Bitcoin Gold, was hacked last night. I don't even think you can register right now. It was a DDoS attack, just like that. A couple people decide we're going to drop 10 million hits a minute or a second on the site, and that's the end of that. Site no longer works. I'm pretty sure it doesn't, or at least it didn't this morning. So I'll leave it at that. Not trying to be a downer, guys. It's just, just change 1Password today. Set up your 2-factor authentication if you haven't. Just get it going. Get it done. All right? All right, cool. In the meantime, I'm going to keep watching this. Praying for 49. Just kidding. I don't really care. That's where my alerts are set. Be a nice scoop up. And altcoins, just keep watching. I don't have any favorite altcoins right now. I think that I'm really just going to go through and watch and see what the volume looks like, what the sentiment looks like, what the charts look like. But Bitcoin is really where that's all I care about at this point. What this price is going to do leading up to 2x, because once 2x is done, I think that we're going to see a little bit of craziness. And then I think in 2018, I think it's just going to be complete rocket ship. So I just want to be prepared for that the most. So we'll see what happens. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you tomorrow. Peace out.